Yeah, can you guys see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so today is the second session on May 7th. Today, our topics that we will be looking into will be handling exceptions and validations in REST APIs, integrating with Postman for API testing, which is something we did yesterday only, and thirdly, introduction to microservices concept. So before I move ahead, I want to talk about a few things that are important from the perspective of today's class. First of all, today is May 7th, and depending on and keeping in mind the things that are happening in our country, I think, and I am based out in Bengaluru, so I think a mock drill might be planned for my city as of now. So at any point in time, if that mock drill starts, I think I'll be facing a power cut, and the whole city will be facing a power cut, and we might have to discontinue the session until that mock drill ends. Okay, so this is one disclaimer I want to give to all of you. This is not in my hands or anybody's hands for that matter. Second thing, in today's class, we also have introduction to microservices concept. So because our sessions are 3 hours only every single day, and because we are also moving on a fast-paced, we are also moving in a fast-paced manner. Therefore, we cannot dwell very deep into the microservices concept because usually microservices will make sense when the project is very complex. Firstly, our project is not very complex. Secondly, we have limited time, so we cannot go into so much depth of microservices, but I will still help you understand everything important from the perspective of microservices that will give you the idea that you need to work with microservices as and when you require it. Okay. So in today's three topics, we will be only touching two because one of them is something we did yesterday only. Okay. That is integrating with Postman for API testing. Is it clear? Okay. All right. Let's move ahead. Okay, so as you can see that we had created a few APIs in the student controller, which were around the basic CRUD operations is what we had studied last day. Okay, that was around adding a student, getting a student by its ID, that is updating a student by their ID and deleting a student, right? These are the four things that we had done yesterday. I would recommend all of you to code along. I think most of you also have the GitHub repository, so you have the same version of code that I have with me. So I think you can code along. That will help you understand things even in a better manner. Okay. I had already shared the GitHub link yesterday. Let me share it with you again. The recordings of the previous sessions will be available on YouTube. This is the GitHub link. Okay, let's get started. So, first of all, let's try to write one or two more APIs. Okay. Okay. Now, one important, interesting thing. So as you can see, I want you to focus on this part of the code. Okay. This is about adding a student, correct? This is about adding a student. So what are the things that we are adding inside a student? We are adding a first name and last name, correct? We are adding a first name and last name. Yes or no? We are adding a first name and last name, correct? Yes or no? Okay. We are going to write, we have only written first name and last name. Okay. So now if I open Postman, if I open Postman and if I go to add new student, what if I don't pass this first name? Then what should happen? If I don't pass this first name, then what should happen? That's my question. If I don't pass first name, then what should happen? Model validation error. Okay. It should send a message. Okay. Something like that. So two things can happen. Either we should let it send an empty value or null value, or we should show an error to the user that this is incorrect. You must be sending a first name, something like that. Please do not draw on my screen. Second. God knows how do I remove it. 1 second. How do I remove this circle? I'll just reshare my screen. Let's move ahead. So in case if I don't add first name, I think what I need to first of all ask myself, is first name mandatory? The answer should be yes. We want our first name to be mandatory. Therefore, we want this to be always populated from the Postman client. We always want the first name. Okay, that is something we are always going to have. So if I go to student class, which is my entity in this case, and I want to make sure that first name is always present, then what I will write over here is I will write at the rate, and then I will write not blank. Okay, this is what I should be writing. But as you can see, this is not acceptable. This is not accepted, right? This is not accepted. Why is this not accepted? This is not accepted because we don't have the relevant dependency for the same. We don't have the relevant dependency for the same. So which dependency that we are looking for? Okay, we are looking for a validation dependency. So we'll go back to our Spring initializer. Let me open Chrome. Opening Chrome. I'll open Spring initializer. Go to dependencies and write validation. No, this is a different validation. It should be Spring Boot starter validation. Let me check if that is the one. Yep, that is the one we are getting. So I'll copy it. And paste it over here. So if you are using IntelliJ, you will see a button like this. Click on this button. What it will do is that it will synchronize your project with the newer dependencies. Okay, so now it has done that. Now I'll go back to student class and you can see that this is now green, which means there is no error anymore. So this not blank annotation is going to tell us that this field must not be blank. That is what it means. Similarly, I don't want the last name to be blank either. So I will write here also not blank. Okay. Are you able to understand what I'm trying to do over here? Are you able to understand what I'm trying to do over here? Okay. Let's start our application. So when you see nullable equals to false, this is for when it goes to the database. This information is for the database. Okay, so my Spring Boot application is now running. I'll go over here and now if I click on send, it will throw me an error. As you can see, some sort of an error came. Okay, what is the error? You can see it says constraint violation exception during persist for groups. Okay, fine. 1 second. Let me just write first of all, first name. And if I make it just an empty string, click on send, it says, or it throws me an internal server error. Okay, what is this internal server error that I'm getting? It is telling me validation was failed for classes. This. Okay, I think I need to restart my server one more time. Just give me 1 second. So this error is coming from database, not the error that I wanted. Okay, I think I know what's happening over here. Why that error was not coming the way I expected it. Okay, so now that we have added a few validations in this file, student.java file, okay, we wrote at the rate not blank in these two fields. But when we go to our student controller, which is present over here, we have to tell that this request body that we are getting, this must follow the validations that are written inside the student class. We have to give some instruction over here, which will tell that whatever information we are getting in this student variable, this must follow the validation constraints that I have created inside the student class. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? Uh, is somebody from Geeks for Geeks present over here? I have to discuss something. Somebody from Geeks for Geeks present over here? I want you to unmute yourself, please. I can see one candidate is trying to record this session, namely Mr. Neerav Sojitra, and he's trying to record the session with OBS software. I am concerned if that would be fair. Somebody present over here from Geeks for Geeks? The host, maybe? Okay, no, I'm not getting a response. He's not trying to go, but he's trying to use OBS as virtual cam. Oh, okay. Okay, if you say so. But it does look like a recording window to me, so I thought I'll just share this concern. If you have missed yesterday's session, today's session will become very difficult for you, Utsav. And secondly, you will get the recordings once our entire 3 sessions will be like done. So you should rather stay updated on the Geeks for Geeks YouTube channel to see what's going to happen. It's not in Python. I am not sure why this is a question in the first place. If you join a Java class if you're trying to learn a technology in Java, you cannot expect me to write code in C++ or Python or any other programming language for that matter. So if you know programming, that is the most basic amount of, like piece of information that is expected to be known. Okay, moving ahead. Moving ahead. So I was just telling you that we have to give some sort of instruction over here, which is going to make sure that this this whatever information we are getting over here, this must follow, this must follow the validation rule that we have written. Okay. So for that, I have to write @valid over here. @valid. Once I write @valid, all the constraints or all the checks that I've added inside the student class, they will be now checked before this API is hit. Now, if I restart my application, okay, so it is now running. Now I'll go back and now you can see I'm passing my first name as empty string. If I click on send, it says bad request. Do you see it? It says bad request. And the response code is also bad request. Right? Are you able to understand what I'm saying? So without the valid annotation, this will not work. Like whatever you have written, it has no meaning of its own. Okay. One more thing you can write, if I go back to the class over here, I can also write something like this message. And I can say over here something like first name must not be null. Okay. So if I write this message like this, that means that whenever I will get this error, this message is what I will see. Okay. So let's restart the app. Let's restart the app. Okay, it is now running. Let's try to send it again. So right now also we are seeing message error as bad request only. Okay, this is coming because of an exception handling that we are not doing. But irrespective of that, are we able to understand that we are now having some sort of validation? Are you able to understand that? Right? So with the help of the at the rate valid, we are now having a validation. Okay, that's great. Now, one more interesting thing. So if I go back to my database right now, let's say go back to my database, which is present over here, and I open my table. This is my table. I will see all the rows, and you can see that I have two rows only, row number one and row number two, right? Now, let's say I try to fetch the user with an ID, okay, is equal to one. Then I see this coming on my screen. Is this correct? Is this correct? So if I try to fetch a student with ID 1, then I should see this information, right? If I write 2, then I should see this information. But what if I write 3? Is the value 3 present in my database? If I click on send, what happens? It says 200 OK, and it gives me an empty screen. Like it gives me nothing. Why is this happening? This is happening because in the student service, when the student is not found, then we are returning a null value. Okay, then we are returning a null value. Okay, so this is what it is happening. But let's imagine a situation that instead of having a null value, let's say we want to throw an exception. Okay, let's say we have to throw an exception. Are we familiar with exception handling in Java? Are we familiar with exception handling in Java? Okay, so we will be using exception handling right now. Okay, so if you are familiar with exception handling in Java, you might also know that in Java, we have the possibility of creating our own exceptions, correct? In Java, we have the possibility of creating our own exceptions with the help of inheritance. So here I will create a new package and I will call it exceptions. Exceptions, and inside the exceptions folder, I will create, let's say, some exception of my choice. Let's say not found exception. Okay, so this is the name of my exception. The name of the exception is not found exception. And because of inheritance, I will write extends runtime exception. Okay, runtime exception. Then here I will just write a constructor. Okay, is this clear what I'm doing over here? Yep. So I was on mute for some reason, and I didn't have the control to unmute myself. That's the reason why that delay happened. Okay, coming back to the class. So we all understand what we are trying to do over here, right? Great. Okay, now let's go back to student controller. Sorry, student service. Okay. So here we have written that when we are trying to fetch a student by ID, then we will get an optional value. Okay, so if the optional value is present, then we will return that value. Otherwise, we can throw an exception or else throw new not found exception with some message. Okay, with some message. So do you see a red color line present over here? You see this red color line present over here, right? How do we solve this? It looks like correct code, but then why is it throwing an error? Because or else throw will require a different kind of syntax. So it will require something like this. Are you able to understand what I have done over here? Are you able to understand what we are writing over here? So this is a lambda expression in Java. Okay, so or else throws takes a argument of supplier. Therefore, we have to write the code like this. So here I can write, let's say something like this: student with ID. Hmm. Are you able to understand this code? Why lambda expression? Because or else throws this particular function, it requires a argument of type supplier, which is a functional interface in Java. Therefore, we have to write a lambda function. Are you understanding what I'm saying? If you find this code to be really complex, it's okay. I can comment it out for now. Okay, I can comment it out for now. I can just write if optional dot is empty, then throw this thing. Okay. Otherwise, we can just return optional value dot get. It's the same thing. Any significant reason for extending runtime exception instead of exception? The reason why I extended runtime exception instead of exception is because of runtime nature. If I had extended the exception class, then I would have to make it a checked exception, and then I have to handle it at every single place, which I don't want to do. You can also throw runtime exception directly, but it is not a good practice. We should not throw generic exceptions every here and there. We should try to throw a very specific exception according to the use case. Yes, you can extend the exception class only, but that will require you to handle or write your code in a like compile time exception manner. So you will have to write throws exception over here, and then at every single place, this function is getting called like that. How to create a global exception? What do you mean by global exception? There's nothing called as global exception. Okay. So this is the same code that this piece of line is doing. This much and this much is the same. Therefore, I will comment it out for you now so that for understanding purpose. And this is what it is doing. They both are doing the same thing. Okay. They both are doing the same thing. All right. So this is around getting the student. Now, do you think that this code will now become a problem? This code will now become a problem, right? This part. Do you see this? This code will become a problem now because this will never be true. This will never be true, right? This will never be true. The reason why this will never be true is that when the student is not found, it will throw an exception instead of returning you a null value. Therefore, this if existing student equal to null will never happen. Clear? Okay. So what I will do is I will just I will remove it. I have now removed it. Okay, now I will go back to student controller, and here for get student by ID, I will write something interesting. I will write try, and I will write catch over here, catch, and I can say not found exception. And I can just write return. So here in this particular function, if I have to return something, the return type must be student, correct? The return type must be student, correct? The return type must be student, correct? But I want to return some sort of object or some sort of error, let's say a string. Then I cannot do that because Java will give me an error that Shantanu, you want to return a student. Why are you returning a string? Are you understanding my problem? Okay, so first of all, one interesting question. What is this going to return? Ultimately, from our project's perspective, this is going to return a response, correct? This is supposed to give us a response. Is that correct? So because it is going to give us a response, we can make use of a return type called as response entity. Response entity. Now, response entity is a generic type class. Okay, so therefore, in these triangular brackets, I have to write the class which is going to tell me what should be the return type or what should be the body of my response. But in this case, I have multiple different types of body. That means sometimes I want to return a student and sometimes I want to return a string. So I can just write a wildcard entry, which is a question mark. So when I have a question mark, what it means is that I can return a response entity with any kind of response body. So this is a wildcard entry. This is what Java recognizes this as a wildcard entry. This is a concept in Java generics. Wildcard entry. Just like we have wildcard entries in reality shows, right? Is it clear? Okay. So now, because the return type is response entity, this line will not work anymore because this line is returning a student and not a response entity. So we need to write some changes. I can write student, or I can write student is equals to this, and then I can write return response entity dot, no, sorry, one second, return. Okay, yeah, I can write response entity dot okay, and then inside this I can write student, and that's it. Now, what is the meaning of okay? What is the meaning of okay? So one quick interesting thing, if I try to fetch a student by ID 3, then I got 200 okay. Do you see this okay? Do you see this okay? So this okay is resolving this okay, and that this okay I've written over here is same. So apparently, just like every request can have multiple types, right? Every request has multiple type, right? Like get type, post type, put type, delete type, etc., etc. Just like that, every response is associated with a number. Every response is associated with a number. Okay, so a lot of numbers have some specific meaning. This number is called as HTTP status code. This number is called as HTTP status code. So every response has a HTTP status code, which is an integer. This integer, in many cases, some integers mean a specific thing. For example, at many places, even before you knew computer science, you would know that 404 means not found. Right? Do you know 404 means not found? So that is a status code. 404 not found is a status code. Just like that, 200 means okay. That means everything is okay. 200 means everything was absolutely fine. And 200 is one of the most used status codes. Okay, so when I write response entity.okay, it means that everything was okay. So as a backend engineer, because I am sending the response, it is my responsibility to tell what is the status code. So what if we want to add a specific status code like 201 or 403? I will show you how to do that also. Give me 5 minutes. I will show you how to do that also. Okay. So this is one way of writing a status code of 200. But if you want to specifically add, then you can write return response and return new response entity. And inside it, you can write student and then you can write 200. But this 200 was not correct because I have to write HTTP status code dot okay like this. So this will internally resolve to 200. So this line and this line are going to mean exactly the same thing. Line number 31 and 32 are going to mean exactly the same thing. Are you understanding what I'm saying? What is HTTP status.OK? HTTP status.OK is going to resolve to status code 200, which means everything is fine. Okay. Response entity is something that we are sending because we are sending a response. Okay. So now in a negative situation, when we did not find the user, we can just say something like this, new response entity, and we can say map dot off, and I can write over here message comma e dot get message, and I can write a status code like http status dot not found, which is 404. Now I will show you how this is going to translate into our Postman. Let me refresh my code. How about 403 forbidden? Every status code has a meaning. So depending on the requirement of your situation, you will write the status code. 403 forbidden is not valid in this situation, therefore I am not going to use it. Is HTTP status a class? No, it is an enum, enumeration. It is an enum. Okay, so I have now started my application. Now I'm trying to fetch a user that does not exist. And if I click on send, we now see HTTP 404 not found, and this is a message. Don't you think this is looking better? So isn't using try catch in controller bad practice? No, it's actually a very good practice. You must always handle your exceptions in controllers. Because if you handle your exceptions in controllers, that will give you more control on what kind of response you want to send to the user on the situation when an exception occurs. Can you explain why we use map.off? Okay. So Jyoti, you're asking me why are we using map.off? Do you understand what is the response? What will this map.off function return? It will return me a map. Now, what is a map? It is a key value pair. And a key value pair is very much like a JSON. Therefore, because I want to send a JSON, I have written a map object. That's the reason why I've written it like this. I can also write a class for this, but then I don't want to take that much headache right now. Okay. So this is how we can handle the exception. But as good engineers, we must also handle the generic exception. What if something happens that we did not anticipate? In that situation, we must handle the generic exception as well. And we must write return new response entity e dot. One second. Let me see if I have this one response dot internal server error e dot get message. Okay, so what this will do is that internal server error means 500, not 504. It means 500. So it will throw us a response of 500, and with whatever message exception is giving us, that exception we will get. Okay, clear? Clear? What e.message will print? That e.message will print the message that is present in your exception. Simple. When can we hit this exception? Let's say you're trying to save something in the database when first name is equal to null. So it will give you a constraint violation exception, which is not handled specifically. Therefore, it will be handled in the generic exception handling and therefore throwing us this exception. That is one of the use cases out of many, many possible use cases. Clear? So this is how we can do exception handling. Is there a good documentation for Spring Boot? Of course there is. All you have to do is search your internet and just find it. Okay. On the same lines, we must also write a validation over here. So I need to write @valid. Okay. And then if the student ID is not the same as the regular ID, then I will send a response entity over here. And I will tell them return new, or I can just write response entity dot bad request, and I can write map dot off. Here I can write the ID in the path and the body are not same. Okay, does it make sense? Secondly, I will just write return, or I can write student updated student is equal to this dot update student. Sorry, this dot student service dot update student. Okay. Now I will write response entity dot OK updated student. If a not found exception occurs, then I can just write a try catch block, try catch not found exception. I'll just copy paste this code. That's it. Are you understanding what we have done? Are you understanding what we are doing? Okay. So now let's come to delete. Again, we cannot delete a student that does not exist. But however, it does not make any difference in our case. Why do we even have to worry about deleting something that does not exist? Like, you think about this. Let's say I want to delete a student with ID 4. Now, let's say if the student existed, then the output is what? That the student is deleted. Correct? The student is deleted. If if the student exists, then the student will be deleted. Correct? And if the student does not exist, then whether the student gets deleted or does not get deleted, it does not make any difference to us, because we want that data to be gone from database and it is already not present in database. So it's okay. So we may not choose to write uh, like, like exception handling in this case. I can write response entity, and if everything works okay, if everything is okay, then I will write return response entity dot okay. Okay. Otherwise, catch exception e, and I will write return say this part. Is it clear? Okay. So this is around exception handling. So now we have handled a lot of exceptions in our situation. Okay. So we have handled a lot of exceptions. We have handled a lot of exceptions. Same thing we'll do over here also. So try. Make sense? Will we just import the not found exception in the class or do we need to call it? No, dude, you need to create it. You need to create the file first and then you just use it like a regular Java class. Okay, so now in this code, we have done successful exception handling as well. Is it clear what I am trying to say? Can you give some example scenario for using catch exception in post mapping? Suppose you're trying, let's say this valid is not present and you're trying to add a student with first name is equal to null. If you try to do that, according to the code you have written in the student class, when it goes to the database, it will see that the first name is null, therefore it will throw you a constraint violation exception. And then that constraint violation exception will propagate to this part of the code and therefore it will throw you an internal server error. I'm using an indentation extension called as rainbow indent, rainbow indent, something like that. Clear? Is it clear? Okay, so this is around exception handling inside Spring Boot projects. Okay, so right now the time is 8:50, which is meaning that we are 1 hour into our session. And the next topic for today, one second, where is it where I wrote it? Yeah. Next topic today is integrating with Postman for API testing, which is not something that we are going to do because we have already done it using Postman. Okay. So we can go around the introduction to microservices, but before that, I can take a quick Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can write. I will take questions until 8:15, sorry, 9:15 before I stop taking questions. So anybody, any questions? So if your questions are related, can I do this in Python or Java or C++? Then I'm not going to answer it. Can you ask or type? I mean, if you can unmute yourself, then best. If you cannot, then just type it. So somebody was asking, what is the meaning of controller advice? Okay, so controller advice is used for handling exceptions. So in this scenario, you can see that I have written catch exception E, exception E. So I have to write it for every single function. With the help of controller advice, I can write how to handle this exception at one place, and that will take care of all these things. Okay. I think I had to explain one important thing, which is this part of the code. Okay. This is very important from Spring Boot's perspective, and I want to tell you what this is. Okay, first of all, I will go back to my browser and I will open a blog from Geeks for Geeks. I want you to focus on this piece of code. Here, I want you to ignore the word synchronized. I want you to ignore the word synchronize over here. Okay. So coming to this part of the code, please enable dark mode. Okay, fine. Okay. Yeah, here you go. I want you to focus on this part of the code. And I want you to ignore the word synchronized over here. This is related to multi-threading, and we don't have time to discuss that right now. Okay. So in Java, also in other programming languages, we have a concept of something called as singleton. We have a concept of something called as singleton. What is the meaning of singleton? A class is called as a singleton class if and only if at any point in time there can exist only and only one object of that class. A class is called as a singleton class if and only if at any point in time we can have not more than one object of that class. That means if you want an object of singleton class, you cannot create it. If it is already present, then use that. If it is not present, then create it. Are you understanding? That means number of objects of singleton is less than equal to 1. That is 0 or 1. If 0, that means that there is no object present of that class. If 1, that means there's only one object present. If you try to create one more, then it will not allow you to create one more. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Singleton. Okay. So here the singleton class is a private constructor because of which you cannot use this constructor anywhere outside to create an object of this class. Okay, I'm talking about singleton again. A singleton class is a class if and a class is called as a singleton class if and only if at any point in time you can have not more than one object of that class. For people who are asking me to explain this in any other programming language than Java, I am not going to answer this question. Okay, any example for singleton? There is no specific example. As a developer, you yourself, you can define if you want a class to be singleton or not. I will come to what is the use case of singleton. Everything I'll come to it. I will come to that. But for the time being, tell me, do you understand what is singleton? Do you understand what is singleton? I will come to why we need it. How is it related to Spring Boot? All of that logic, I'll give you that. All of that logic I will give you. But are you understanding what is the meaning of singleton? Okay, I'm repeating for one last time. A class is a singleton class if and only if at any point in time there can exist not more than one object of that class. Okay, so this is called as a singleton class. Okay, so now one question is, why do we need it? Why do we need it? Okay, let's imagine a situation. I'm writing a hypothetical Java file. Let's create a new text file. Over here only we'll create file. Okay, let's say test. Some random things I just want to write over here. That's why I've created this file. Suppose you have a class called as database connection. Suppose you have a class called as database connection. Okay, what is the purpose of this class? Is to connect to the database. Suppose there is a class called as database connection, and the purpose of this class is to connect to the database. Okay, the purpose of this class is to connect to the database. Okay, so now to connect to the database, we have, let's say, to connect to the database, let's say it takes 5 seconds of time. To connect to the database, it takes 5 seconds of time. Suppose, okay, for the database connection, it will take 5 seconds of time. Let's say this is something we already know. Okay, so now let's say we have to talk about student. Let's say class student repository. Inside the student repository class, we have some functions like add student. So public add student, sorry, public student add student. Okay, suppose we have a function like this. So because we want to add the student, we want to add the student to the database, correct? We want to add the student to the database. Is that correct? So to add the student to the database, I need a database connection. Yes or no? I need a database connection. So in order to create a database connection, I will have to write database okay, and then I have to write connection dot get table something like student dot add, or let's say add new row student, something like this. I mean, this is all dummy code. It's all dummy code. This code is not valid, just for understanding purpose. Okay, so I need to write something like this. I need to write something like this. So first of all, I have to create a database connection. After creating the database connection, right? After creating the database connection, we have to get the table, whatever table we are saving the student in, and add a new row student. So Sharad is asking, this is not valid code, Sharad. This is just for understanding purpose. Please don't associate this with a real Spring Boot code. This is just an example. That's why I'm writing this in a test.txt file, not in a Java file. This is just an example. Please try to focus on the words that I'm using at the time of explaining something. Do not try to take every single thing from the literal perspective. This is just an example. Okay, so you do understand, right? In order to add a student, I have to create a database connection and then add the new student in the database accordingly. So focus on this. Let's say your application is live and there are so many people and so many users that are using this application. If so many people are using this application, then so many people will try to add a student. Correct? Then so many students, so many people, and so many users of your application will want to add a student. Yes or no? If so many people will want to add a student, then this function will be called hundreds and millions of times. Right? And if this connection is called hundreds and millions of times, every single time database connection will be newly created. A new database connection will be created. And how much time it will take each time? 5 seconds. Now, can you understand the delay it will cause? Can you understand the load it will cause on your database to maintain a new connection every single time? Right? So if instead of doing this headache, suppose we have a database connection as singleton class is singleton. So if somebody has created an object of this class, I can just write database connection is equals to database. So once I do this, this will check that if I already have an object of database connection. If I do, then it will not create a new object. And if it does not have, then a new object will be created. So because of this reason, how many times I have to spend 5 seconds? Only one time. So even if there are millions and crores of requests, it will only be spending 5 seconds one time. Are you able to understand why we need singleton now? But the constructor is private. That's correct. So if you look at the code that is present in Geeks for Geeks, look at the get instance function. Because the constructor is private, I can use the constructor inside the singleton class only, right? I can do that. So if the instance is null, then create a new object. Otherwise, return the existing instance. I agree that the constructor is null, but this get instance function is only going to take care of creating the new instance if it is not present. Are you able to understand why we need singleton? And this is a very good example. So when in Spring Boot also, our database connection is handled by a singleton class. Okay. All right. So this is what is the meaning of singleton. All right, let's move ahead. And what if we want multiple object in an interview? It is asked. Then don't create a singleton. Don't create a singleton. Simple as that. If you want multiple objects, then don't make your class singleton. That's it. It's like saying if I don't want the value true, what should I get? Then false. It's simple as that, right? Your regular class is a non-singleton class. Your regular class is going to be a non-singleton class. Okay, now coming to the idea of Spring Boot. Now everything that I'm going to talk about is Spring Boot specific. In Spring Boot, we have a concept of bean. We have a concept of bean, B-E-A-N, bean. It's not like Mr. Bean, it's different. We have a concept of bean. What is a bean? Bean is like a singleton class. Focus on the word like. Its behavior is 99.999% like a singleton, but it can be different sometimes. For the time being, for you imagine or you assume that it's like singleton only. Okay. So bean is like a singleton class. Please focus on the word. Please focus on this sentence that bean is like a singleton class. However, I also want to emphasize on the word like because sometimes the behavior will be slightly different from singleton. Okay, this is only Spring Boot specific, not specific to core Java. Okay, are you understanding what I'm saying so far? This is not specific to core Java. This is specific to Spring Boot only. Okay, so it is like a singleton class. Now, if I go back to, if let's say, if I create a bean in Spring Boot, it is, okay, if I create a bean in Spring Boot, then when we start our Spring Boot app, the object of the bean, one second, one object of the bean class is created by Spring Boot and is stored in the memory and is used wherever necessary. I want you to read the sentence. I want you to read the sentence. If I create a bean in Spring Boot, then when we start our Spring Boot app, one object of the bean class is created by Spring Boot and is stored in the memory and is used wherever necessary. I want you to read the sentence and tell me if you're able to understand it. So we don't create the object of bean. Spring Boot only creates it. We just have to tell this class has to be a bean. Okay, we will not create the object of bean class. We just have to tell Spring Boot that this class is going to be a bean, which means this class is going to act like singleton. Therefore, create the object and store it in the memory. And then Spring Boot will give me that object wherever necessary. Is there a multiple bean as you mentioned? One object. There can be multiple beans, like I said, like a singleton class. So you can create multiple beans of like every class can become a bean. So if you have 10 classes and if you tell each class is a bean, then there will be 10 objects that will be created. Are you able to understand this line? If I create a bean in Spring Boot, then when we start our Spring Boot app, one object of the bean class is created by Spring Boot and is stored in the memory and is used wherever necessary. Okay. Now I want to go back to student service. Okay, so in student service, I have written at the rate service. Can you see it? At the rate service on line number 11. When I write at the rate service, what does it mean? Whenever I write any class, and on top of that class, if I write at the rate service, this class will become a bean. According to Spring Boot, this class will become a this class will become a bean. This class will become a bean. Are you understanding what I am trying to say? This class will become a bean. Okay, this class is now going to become a bean. So whenever we will start our Spring Boot application, one object of student service will be created by Spring Boot only, and it will be stored in the memory of Spring Boot. Now, if I go back to student controller, in student controller, you can see that I require to use an object of student service. I need an object of student service so that I can do my job, right? I need an object of student service so that I can do my job. Is that correct? I need an object of student service so that I can do my job, right? Now, because of that reason, I have created this variable. Now, because this class is a bean, therefore this object is already present with Spring Boot. And in order to get that object which is already present by Spring Boot into this class, I have written this logic. So here, this is called as dependency injection. And we are trying to do this dependency injection like this. So every class you decorate with at the rate service will become a bean. No, this is dependency injection because student service is a dependency student service is a dependency of student controller, and I want to inject the dependency into my class, therefore dependency injection. I will come to your question, Sayali. Please give me 2 minutes. Let me explain things one by one. I cannot explain every single thing at once and then answer your questions. I want you to give me 5-10 minutes of time after I'm done explaining something. So ask your questions related to at the rate service and dependency injection for the time being. Can we directly do that in field instead of constructor? What do you mean by that, Gaurav? I'm not able to understand. Is this field injection or constructor injection? This is constructor injection. This is constructor injection. There is something called a setter injection. There is something called a setter injection. If I don't write this, let's say I don't write this, and if I remove the word final over here, and if I write at the rate auto wired, this will also work absolutely fine. This will also work absolutely fine. This is called a setter injection. It might look like field injection, but the right word is setter injection. Okay, this is setter injection. However, it is a good practice to use it like this. It is a good practice. In most engineers will suggest you to use it like this rather than using it like this. This is the better practice, the second one. Okay, so this is the better practice, a better way of doing it. They both are doing the same thing, but it's just a better way of doing it. Now people are asking why. The reason why this is a better way is because you think about it like this. When Spring Boot will try to create an object of student controller, it will try to create the object with the help of using a constructor. Now, when it has a valid constructor that does a dependency injection for you, then it is already handled in the constructor injection. Otherwise, an object will be created first and then the dependency will be injected, which is not what we want. Why to make it a two-step process when you can make it a one-step process? Okay, so this is how Spring Boot is going to work. Okay, I'm just repeating this one more time. If you do not write a constructor like this, then what will happen is that when Spring Boot will try to create an object of student controller, it will need a constructor. Okay, so it is going to make use of this constructor only, and this constructor is going to require an object of student service, which is already present in Spring Boot. So it will give that object over here, and that same object will be given to this field. So it will become a one-step process. If I don't write it like that, then it will become a two-step process where first an object of student controller will be created and then the value of student service will be set, which is not what we want. Why it's setter injection? Because it sets the value later. That's why it's called setter injection. You don't see a setter in this case, but internally a setter is used. Okay. All right. So this is called as dependency injection. Now we know that at the rate service, uh, if I asked one question that if there is only one constructor, then can we omit at the rate auto-wired, right? Yes, you can, but again, good practice. It's so even if I don't write auto-wired over here, Spring Boot is smart enough to understand what it requires to do, but good practice to write at the rate auto-wired. So even if you have more fields, you can just keep on adding those in the constructor. Yes, that's correct. Difference between field and setter injection. There is no difference in the output. It's just the number of steps. Okay. So coming back to the code. So we just understood that whenever we decorate something with at the rate service, it becomes a bean, right? Now let me go back to my text file to make bean. Use. Right? This is what we saw right now. This is what we saw right now. This is what we saw right now. However, there are more than just there are more than just one service. I can also write at the rate component. I can also write at the rate repository. I can also write at the rate REST controller. I can also write at the rate controller. However, this is not. We can also use remainings. These three. We can also make no for bean. We can come to it later. Okay, let's say to make a class a bean, we use this. Okay, so to make a class a bean, we can use any of these annotations at the rate service, at the rate component, at the rate repository, at the rate REST controller, at the rate controller. Now focus on what I'm going to say. Out of these fives, at the rate component is the real player to make a class a bean. At the rate service, at the rate repository, at the rate REST controller are just one or two extra, one second, behave the same way as at the rate component, but have one or two extra features, especially at the rate REST controller. I want you to read this part. I want you to read this part that I have written. I want you to read this part. And after reading, tell me if you understand it. Okay, so at the rate component is the real player to make a class a bean. At the rate service, at the rate repository, at the rate REST controller, they all behave the same way as at the rate component, but have one or two extra features, especially REST controller. All the above annotations internally use component only. Okay. Now, for at the rate repository and at the rate service, they have hardly, I mean, the real reason why they are different from component is just to tell that this is a repository and this is a repository, this is a service. However, REST controller has one or two extra features. So, for example, if I go back to my controller over here, you can see that in this particular function, so in this particular class, which is a REST controller, in this particular class, which is a REST controller, I am writing a function called as add two numbers that is returning an integer. It is not returning it is not returning a response entity. It is returning an integer. So even when I trigger this API, it will return. Ultimately, in Postman, I will get a response. Right? Ultimately, in Postman, what I will be getting is a response, not an integer. Correct? That integer is a part of that response. What I will actually get is response, not an integer. Is that correct? That is happening because of REST controller. If I just write this as at the rate component, it will not behave in the same way. So this is an extra power that REST controller has. So what happens is that when I mute myself due to any reason, I like this time I muted myself deliberately, but I'm not able to unmute myself until Geeks for Geeks gives me the permission to unmute. That's why when I mute myself, I just stay muted. Okay, coming back to this file, I hope you're able to understand what it means. I hope you're able to understand what this means, right? Okay, so the real reason why a class becomes a bean is because of at the rate component. At the rate service, at the rate repository, they all internally use at the rate component. For example, if I go to the student service file, and if I go inside this annotation, if I go inside the service annotation, you will see that it says it is an alias for annotation equals to component.class, which means that it is going to behave the same way as component at the rate component. Got it? Just like that, if I go to student repository over here, and if I open this, you will see exactly the same thing. Got it? Similarly, if I go to student controller, if I go to REST controller, you will see exactly the same thing. So they all internally implement at the rate controller. Sorry, at the rate component. In REST controller, it implements controller. Now controller will internally implement component. What does this alias for annotation does? This is internal to Spring Boot and it is not required for us to understand. So it is a Spring Boot internal thing. This is not important for us to understand. That is correct. Sharad, what Sharad has written, that is correct, but then we don't use it. If we just want to use at the rate control, then we should be working with regular Spring, not with Spring Boot. However, you can still use it, but then developers don't use it. If your application is of the type that you have to send templates, then just use a Spring application rather than using a Spring Boot application. Okay, is it clear what I just said? Is it clear what I just said? Now, do you understand dependency injection? Do you understand at the rate auto-wired, at the rate service, at the rate repository, at the rate REST controller, everything, right? Cool. I cannot summarize. I'm not AI. Sorry about that. When I go to student controller, I want you to notice one more thing. So you can see that all the APIs here start with @student. Sorry, start with /student. Do you see that? They all start with /student. They all start with /student. In order to make this simple, what I can do is instead of writing /student in every single URL, I can just write over here @request mapping. And here I can write /student. If I write /student in the class level, then this value will be annotated to all of the APIs. So if I do this, it's going to work just fine. Okay, it is going to be exactly the same. Clear? It's going to be exactly the same. Okay, let's try to see this in action. Let me restart my app. Okay, so my app has been restarted. Let me try to fetch a student with let's say ID 2. If I click on send, I get my answer. So you can see that @request mapping also works exactly fine. Clear? All right, I can take a few questions before I move to microservices. That will be a separate concept altogether. For that, we might even use a different Spring Boot project if I have to do that. So yeah. What is the main difference between relational NoSQL while using in Spring Boot? Like why we need Spring Data JPA for just for SQL DB, but not for MongoDB? Who said you don't need it for MongoDB? You use it for MongoDB also. You can use it for MongoDB also. So the way your Spring Boot might want the code to be written a little bit might differ in case of MongoDB. Like it doesn't support @entity. It will support @document, something like that. So that is something you need to read in the documentation of Spring Boot and then move ahead. But that is not true that you cannot use JPA for Spring Boot in MongoDB. Is there any syntax change if I use MySQL? No, zero syntax change. No change at all. So in your properties file, you have already declared everything that your dialect is going to be MySQL dialect. Your driver class is going to be MySQL driver. So it's all going to work just fine. Please tell about something cross origin. So cross origin, also called as CORS, is a networking protocol which is handled by the which is handled by options type request. It is for making sure that the request is incoming from the incoming request is coming when an incoming request is coming from a different IP address or a different port number or different process, then usually then we handle the cross origin request. So that is something that we do. So we have to add relevant headers so that our resources only uh, accessible to relevant IP addresses. That's why we handle cross origin. When do we get a lecture on Spring Security? We don't. This is not a part of this three-day drill. Spring Security is extremely complex and cannot be handled, cannot be covered in like 1 hour. It's very complex and it's not a part of our course outline, so I'm not going to cover it. Any more questions? Tomorrow is covered, right? Let me check. Let me recheck the syllabus once. It is deploying Spring Boot application to cloud, secure APIs with basic authentication, hands-on mini backend project. So when we talk about basic authentication, of course, it can require Spring Boot, sorry, Spring Security, but then Basic authentication is hardly 0.1% of Spring security. Disadvantages of singleton. Uh, Technically zero. There are no disadvantages of singleton. Do we have life cycle of these objects injected? I am not sure. I think not, but I don't think so. How to check the SQL table in terminal? Is it possible? You need to check. Ask ChatGPT. That will help you more. I want to answer questions relevant to this class. Spring Boot is important software field? Of course, yes. Dialect is not optional. Dialect is mandatory. Can somebody apply for intern after these three? Yes, you can. I can take one or two more questions before I move to microservices. I cannot tell you the interview questions on this. Dispatcher servlet, that is more specific to Hibernate and other previous Java-based backend development technologies. So yeah. Any more questions? I can take one more. Instead of using data connection or data source object, can we use JPA repository? This question makes me a little bit angry because I had very clearly said that this is just a test file, dummy code. So I don't understand why are you guys taking this very seriously. Okay, one last question. Can you share how to make controller advice? Not right now. If we have time left, then I will do it. What is a mistake? Okay, not answering this question. Can we create another Spring Boot project for Microsoft and perform action along with you? Yes, you can do that. Okay. As of now, I will give you 2 minutes of break. It's exactly 9:30. So I'll give you 2 minutes of break, or let's say 3 minutes of break to drink water, go to the washroom, whatever the hell you want to do. Let me open clock. So taking a 3 minute break. Start. Yes, I got it. Cool. Again, I was not able to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Okay, let's get back to our coding. My screen is still shared, right? Yes. Let's get back to our coding. Now I want to talk about a new topic. Somebody is asking, "Aap Jharkhand se?" I'm like, yes, I am from Jharkhand. Okay, I want to talk about a new topic. For that, I will open my favorite drawing book. Hmm. Okay. Now we are going to discuss a new topic, and this is a very interesting topic called as microservices. The class is not over, I'm still talking. Now we are going to talk about a new topic called as microservices and Spring Boot. First of all, I want you all to understand what is microservice. So microservice is not related to Spring Boot specifically. It is a concept that you can implement with the help of Spring Boot also. Okay, so first thing, it is a concept. It is not specific to Spring Boot. It is a concept. Just like printing or just like writing a function is a concept of programming, which you can do in any programming language. Just like that, microservice is a concept. Clear? Do you know, are you understanding that microservice is not related to a programming language? It is just a concept. It's a concept. Okay. Now, I want you all to remember the kind of biology we studied in school. So you guys remember that when we were studying biology, we studied cells. Remember studying cells, plant cell, animal cell, unicellular organisms, then multicellular organisms, and stuff like that, right? So biology, while we were studying biology, we first of all we started with understanding what is a cell, right? Now, what is a cell? A cell is a single unit of life which basically just exists and can do everything on its own. It can move, it can eat, it can digest, it can reproduce, it can do whatever it wants. Correct? It can do whatever it wants. So in unicellular organisms, everything is handled inside one cell only. However, if we talk about multicellular organisms like us human beings only, we are extremely complex organisms and we have specialized systems to do specialized work. For example, our entire digestive system's job is to digest food. Our entire circulatory system's job is to circulate blood in the body. Our entire respiratory system's job is to breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Correct? Correct? Right? So just the same logic is applicable in the world of computer science also. So imagine that you have a backend application. Imagine you have backend application. If this backend application is performing all the complicated tasks in itself, then it's like a unicellular organism. Just like just like an amoeba takes care of digesting food, moving, hunting, reproducing everything on its own. Just like that, if our one backend application takes care of everything on its own, then it's like a unicellular organism, right? If it is doing everything on its own, all the tasks on its own, then it's like a unicellular organism, right? It's like a unicellular organism. But what if, but let's take a different example. Let's say there are multiple backends. Let's say circulatory, or let's say backend B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. So many backends are there. And collectively, let's say as a collection, arrange to backward. Yeah. Collectively, they are all performing as one single application. Then it is like multicellular organism. right? So let's say this is your whole app. This big box is your application where B1, B2, B3, B4, B5 each are doing their own specialized tasks. Each are doing their own specialized tasks. Then this is like a multicellular organism where we can say that every backend is like an organ or it's like a organ system. Can we say that? Yes or no? Right? So a microservice architecture looks like this only. This is what a microservice architecture looks like. It will definitely be more complex to manage, yes. Increasing the complexity will, of course, come with its own cost. That is true. But this is what microservice architecture is. Are you able to understand what is microservice architecture? Where you have multiple services that are together as one doing one job or together as one, like acting as one application. That is what is a microservice architecture. These are all individual services. They are all individual services. They are all individual services. Clear? Okay. All right. So they are all individual services. This is what microservice architecture is. And in the world of computer science, if you have one very big backend application that is doing equivalent tasks of all of this thing, then this is called as monolithic architecture or monolith architecture. So here we have two examples. One is a very big backend and one is another very big backend, but it has multiple microservices. Okay. Are you able to understand what is the difference between monolithic architecture and microservice architecture? Okay. So when you have multiple microservices that are taking care of one major application, that is called as microservice architecture. And when there is only one backend that takes care of everything on its own, then it's called monolithic architecture. So in my company at Intuit, what I am doing, what my daily job is to convert this into this, to convert a monolithic architecture into microservice architecture. This is what I do every day. This is what I do every day in my company. I go to office and I do this only every day. Okay. So in microservice architecture, we have to create multiple services. We have to create multiple services. Now, let me give you an example of a microservice architecture. Think about a website like Geeks for Geeks. Okay, think about a website like Geeks for Geeks. So in Geeks for Geeks, what is there? In Geeks for Geeks, there is a place where you can make payments. Or let's say Geeks for Geeks is I want something more complex. Let's take Flipkart, for example. Okay, let's take Flipkart, for example. So let's say you're trying to place an order in Flipkart. Okay. So when you are, let me just show Flipkart to you. Let me open Flipkart. Okay. So I have opened Flipkart. Now let's say I want to order something. Let's say I click on TV and appliances and I want to order, let's say TV. TV, TV. Okay. I want good TV. So I'll take Samsung or LG, whatever. Uh, let's say I want this TV. Okay. Now, when I open this place, when I open this website, then I am getting the information of this TV from some place, which is now coming to my browser. That is what is the price, what is the name, what is the photo, Is it available or out of stock? What are the display sizes? What was the launch year, etc., etc. I'm getting this information from some place. Correct? I'm getting this information from some place. Correct? I'm getting somebody is giving me this information, right? Now, as a user, I don't care. Suppose I want the biggest TV, 65 inches, and I click on buy now. Okay, the moment I click on buy now, I have to enter my information. Okay, so the moment now notice the moment I see the login or sign up option, the moment I enter my mobile number or email address and click on continue, it will try to log me in. It will try to log me in or create a new account for me. Now somebody is doing this for me. Somebody is doing this for Flipkart, that is logging in and adding new user. Somebody is going to do that. Secondly, after delivery address addition, order summary, then you will see payment options where I have to make payment. Now I have multiple ways to make payment: credit card payment, debit card payment, net banking payment, UPI payment, Flipkart gift card payment, blah, blah, blah. So many types of payment is there, right? MobiKwik payment, simple payment, credit payment, uh, lazy pay payment. So many types of payment is there, right? So many payment options are present. Correct? Now somebody is going to handle my payments, right? Some part of Flipkart is going to handle my payments, right? Some part of Flipkart is going to handle my payments. Similarly, some part of Flipkart will do the inventory management to understand which part is or which product is deliverable to what part of India. Correct? So though that is all of these separate entities are examples of individual microservices. So let's say this is authentication auth service. This can be payment service. Payment service. This can be what? Inventory service. Inventory service. What else can we have? Inventory service. What else do we need? Customer service. Customer service. Yeah, that's a good one. Customer service. Customer service as in to handle help desk and everything. Okay, what else? Scheduling. No, no, no. Login service. That's already a part of auth service. What else do we need in Flipkart? So Flipkart also has flight bookings option available, right? So let's say flight booking service, for example, travel service. Okay. So all of these services individually combine together to make Flipkart. Are you understanding what I'm saying? All of these services individually combine together to make Flipkart, right? There can be one more logistics service to handle the logistics, right? All of these services together are making the big application like Flipkart. If all of these applications or all of these capabilities were present in the same backend, then it will be a monolithic architecture. But if they are separated and spread out in different smaller services, then that becomes a microservice architecture. Do you understand what is microservice architecture now? Is it making sense? Okay. All right. Now I'll give you one advantage of microservice architecture. So right now it's summer season, and if I go to Flipkart's website, you can see it says sale ends tomorrow. So right now there is a sale that's happening on Flipkart, correct? Right now there is a sale that is happening on Flipkart. So if there is a sale, of course the prices will be low. If the prices are low, then a lot of people will try to purchase items, correct? Then a lot of people will want to purchase items, correct? If a lot of people are purchasing items, then inventory service and payment service will get overloaded because a lot of requests are coming to these two particular services, right? If it is a sale right now, then inventory service and payment service will become overloaded right now because there is a lot of traffic coming to payment service and inventory service, right? So now, because a lot of traffic is coming to these two services, then I need to do something so that they can handle more traffic. I need to do something so that they can handle more traffic without breaking down, right? In order to do this, what should I do? Okay, I need to do some sort of scaling. Now, one quick question. So right now, everybody is I'm assuming that everybody has joined this class either using a mobile phone or a laptop. Now, either you're using a mobile phone or a laptop, you have some sort of RAM in your computer, some sort of, there is some RAM, some memory, some CPU cores, etc., etc., correct? So if let's say if what happens when you overload your phone, when you have a lot of things happening on your phone or your laptop, then your laptop will start to lag, correct? Because the load is very high on your machine. So if you don't want to reduce the load, but if you want your machine to handle more load, you will increase the resources like adding more CPU, adding more RAM, clearing your memory, something like that you will do, right? To make space for the load that is coming. Okay, so this is called as scaling. This is called as scaling, upscaling, upscaling. That means increasing resources so that more load can be handled. This is called as scaling. So if you want to scale, you have to increase the CPU or you have to increase the RAM or you have to increase both. Correct? You have to increase the CPU or increase RAM or increase both. Correct? If you increase either RAM or CPU or both, you have to pay more. You have to pay more. Correct? You have to pay more amount of money. Of course, it's not going to come for free, right? You have to pay more amount of money. So in a microservice architecture, if these two services are overloaded, you can just upscale them. Let's say I have upscaled them now. Oops. So I'm just going to upscale them. Oh, so difficult to draw this. Do I have a pencil icon? One second, guys. Yeah. So I need to upscale this and I also need to upscale this. Let's say after upscaling, the load is now okay. Therefore, I can handle the load. And now I will make this green. Oh, I want to make this green. Apply. This is too green. Anyway, this is fine, I guess. Okay. So after upscaling, they both are now able to handle the load. Correct? They both are now able to handle the load. Somebody's asking all services will be loaded. Why only payment inventory? Because the load is high on this service. All services are active, but because the load is high on payment service and inventory service, I am upscaling them. That means increasing the resources on these two services. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So if I increase the resources on these two, then I have to pay accordingly. Okay. So in this case, because I'm upscaling smaller services, I have to pay, let's say, $100. But if the same problem happened in this, I have to upscale the entire backend. I have to upscale the entire backend, which will require even more RAM and even more space, and it will cost me even more. So for this, I might need to pay $500. Yes, we have to pay even though we don't want to use it. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? This is one of the biggest reasons why things like this are preferred, microservices. Similarly, let's say due to some reason your customer service is not working. Due to some reason your customer service is not working. Does that mean a payment? Does that mean somebody cannot place an order? Does that mean that somebody cannot place an order? Somebody can still place an order, right? But the same thing is not true over here. If your payment service, if your customer service is not working, your whole app is not working. That means you cannot do anything. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So these are some of the advantages of microservices. These are some of the advantages of microservices. Okay. These are some of the requirements of microservices. Okay. So this course outline mostly talks about an introduction to microservices concept. So now we understand what is a microservice concept. Right? Now we know what are these microservices concepts. Right? We already know what are the advantages of microservices and what is this concept altogether, right? We have already understood it. Now, how to do this in Spring Boot? So it's very simple. Technically, you create multiple Spring Boot applications and each application does one kind of job. Each application does one kind of job and you interlink each of the applications using some sort of connector. Shift S is saying doesn't seem like an advantage. If you have a car and let's say the AC of your car is not working, does that mean you cannot drive your car? If the AC of your car is not working and if you're still able to drive your car, trust me, it's an advantage. It's not a disadvantage. A disadvantage of microservice would be it is difficult to maintain. It is difficult to maintain. That is a bigger disadvantage of microservices. Which is more expensive? Usually the monolithic architecture is more expensive and more difficult to maintain. Microservices are easier to maintain because each service has one team and that team takes care of that service. Therefore, they know end-to-end things about that service and it takes lesser, like depending on your load, you may scale it, you may not scale it. Isn't it a headache to connect them internally? It is. It is a headache. But you still will be able to do it. It is still okay. It is still, I mean, a manageable headache. It's a manageable headache. Okay. So if you wanted to do this in real, you would create multiple Spring Boot applications and each Spring Boot application will do its own job. Each Spring Boot application will do its own job, and you will interlink one service with the other depending on which service uses what. For example, at the time of, let's say, creating logistics, let's say when you are let's say you have ordered something. So after you have ordered something, you want to see that whether that item is going to be delivered to you or not, right? In order to do that, you must be connected with inventory service, right? Let's say you placed an order for one television. So the inventory should have the television, only then the order can be placed. After the order is placed, then that code can go to logistics service to handle the logistics. Now, Sachin is asking, communicate through APIs, right? Well, I want to talk about one more thing. Let's say I take one more application. Let's say I take something called as a payment gateway. Just a small example, payment gateway. So a lot of online websites and mostly a lot of startups, they make use of a payment gateway in order to integrate payments. For example, JustPay. You might have heard of the brand called as JustPay, JUSPAY, or PayU, PAY, and then U. So if let's say you want to create your online website that has to accept payments, you will most probably integrate your website with Cash-Free, Razorpay, JustPay, JustPay, or like what else? Cash-Free, JustPay, HDFC Bank, etc., etc. Okay, so those are called as payment gateways. Recently, Amazon created their own payment gateway, and now they have started to use their own payment gateway. Okay, So let's say that we have a payment gateway. It's a new service. It's a totally new service and it is not a part of Flipkart. Okay, let's say it is like Razor Pay, for example, Razor Pay. And let's assume that Flipkart is taking the payment information from Razor Pay. So therefore, this payment service is not present with Flipkart, it is present with Razor Pay. Let's assume that. Therefore, in this kind of a situation, any interaction to payment service must be done with the help of an API. That is, the endpoints payment service is extending. Those endpoints need to be called internally by the Flipkart microservice architecture. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? Probably not, but I still want to say yes or no. If your website is using a payment service from a different provider like Razor Pay, then your payment service is not a part of Flipkart, it's a part of Razor Pay. So in order to make the payment, Flipkart needs to talk to Razor Pay so that the payment can be done. Therefore, they need to talk via APIs. They need to talk via APIs. However, whenever any communication needs to happen internally, this may happen with the help of APIs or without APIs, depending on how the services are arranged within each other. Depending on how the services are arranged within each other. In most cases, in 99.99999% of the cases, all the communication happens via API. All the communication happens via API, but in some situations, the communication may not happen via an API depending on the project structure. Depending on project structure. Sir, can we do that for authentication also like using Keycloak? Yes, you can. Is it clear what I'm saying? So this is how microservices work. One very interesting thing is it is not necessary for all of your microservices to be of the same or following the same technology. Something can be written in Spring Boot, something can be written in Node.js, something can be written in Django, something can be written in ASP.NET or VB.NET, or something can be written in Golang also. It does not make any difference. How many communication types are there? GraphQL, REST API, or internal function call, that's it. Okay, so it doesn't matter what technology you're using, each service can use its own technology. So let's say travel service is better in JavaScript. So you can make it in JavaScript. Auth service is better in Django. Make it in Django. Logistics service is better in Java. Make it in Java. Inventory service is better in .NET. Make it in .NET, and so on and on and on. Whatever technology you want to use, you can use it depending on the requirement. Is it clear what I'm saying? They come under one solution or different one whole microservice components. I don't understand your question. How do we connect those different Spring Boot services in monolith? If you have a monolith, you don't have different Spring Boot services. I'm creating an e-commerce application for a client. So could you suggest me a good and cost-effective payment gateway service? HDFC Bank, cash free, these are better ones. So if you have one one monolithic architecture, you don't have multiple applications in the first place. So why do you want to communicate when all the code is written inside the same code base? How does microservice architecture integrate with front end? Cool. So this is a good question. So what really happens is, okay, let me remove this diagram. Let's take a front end application, FE. So this front end application will usually have something called as an API gateway. This is going to look very, very, very complex. So if you don't understand, it's okay. It has something called as an API gateway. API gateway. So the front end makes the request to API gateway. The API gateway will decide where will this request go. The API gateway sends the request to the relevant service depending on the requirement. and then collects the response, gives it to front end, and then front end gives it to the client. This is how it happens. Clear? Can you have two classes with REST controller? Yes, you can have as many number of classes with REST controller as you want. Is all microservice exposed to external user? No, not necessary. You can restrict your microservices to be present in this in a specific cloud network if you want to. So therefore, all of those microservices will not be accessible to the external user. Which payment gateway is best for e-coms? I think I've already answered this question. API gateway is also handled in backend? No. Many a times not. In a microservice like architecture, it is not handled internally in the backend. Usually it is written externally with the help of AWS or Google Cloud Platform or something like that. Role-based access control, which is called as RBAC, is difficult in microservices? No. So what happens is your RBAC will be controlled by your auth services. Auth service will control your RBAC. RBAC stands for role-based access control. To explain RBAC to you, for example, let's say you are in a school and you have a teacher, and then this teacher is teaching multiple students. You are one of the students, and all the students wrote an exam. So after the results are out, you will only be able to see your marks. You cannot see the marks of any other student, but the teacher can see the marks of every single student. So the teacher has the access to see the marks of every student, but you don't. So because the teacher has the role of a teacher, they can perform more activities than you can perform as the role of a student. Right? So this is called as RBAC, role-based access control. So all of these things are handled in auth service only. So you have to create a separate auth service that takes care of RBAC. What about course setup in microservice? That is done in API gateway. Are we going to make a project on this architecture? No. We don't have the time. It's, as you can see, it's very complex. We don't have the time of creating multiple microservices. Can we place microservice on different places and connect them easily? Yes, that is also possible. What about core setup? I think I've already explained. It will happen inside API gateway. What about payment in USD? That depends on your payment service. Talk to your payment service. How do we connect database with the separate API service? Do we need API gateway for it too? How do we connect database with the separate API service? API service. Are you trying to say API gateway, Murali? Is that what you're trying to talk about? I'm not able to understand that. I'm not able to understand your question. I'm not able to understand your question. Uh, okay, you're not answering anymore, so I'll wait until you answer. Any more questions, anyone? So technically, we are done with today's class. We can talk a little bit more around microservices if you want, but I have nothing else to teach. We have same database and multiple tables in it. Yes, that is true. You can connect each of these microservices with the same database or multiple database depending on your use case. That totally depends on you. At least we can take guide on how to connect multiple projects. So technically, you have to make a API call. So what you should be looking for is how to make an API call in a Spring Boot application. So one of the ways is by using REST template. Let me show it to you. I want you to notice this piece of code. Look at this piece of code. It is written inside Geeks for Geeks. It's one of the articles with Geeks for Geeks. So there is a class called as REST template, which comes from Spring Boot. You see this? There is a class called as REST template, which comes from Spring Boot. Right? Do you see this? There is a class called as REST template, which is coming from Spring Boot. Right? So this class is one of the ways to do what Postman does for us. This is one of the ways to do what Postman is doing for us. So it's like making a request to a different client. Now, in this case, your different client can be a different microservice inside your own application. So you can make a call to a different microservice by using REST template. So you can see that the variable has been created over here, and it is not a bean, therefore no auto wiring is happening over here. And let's say you want to fetch a user data which is coming from a different client. So you write the URL of that client and you pass what should be the response of this particular call. So get for object means a get call. So what this line is doing is that it is making a HTTP get call on this URL, and whatever JSON is coming, it is trying to store that as an object of user data class. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Okay, so this is one of the ways of connecting multiple microservices. There are more. There is something called as GraphQL, which is very complex, and I'm pretty sure you will not understand right now. So GraphQL is one of the ways. Then there is reactive Spring, which is nowadays becoming a more standard way of doing this. Again, very complex. So this REST template is one of the easier ones. How do we connect with these different services via Postman, like the way you explained it via API gateway? So okay, so it's very simple. So if depends where your Postman is. If your Postman can access the internal network of your microservice, then you can directly call using the endpoints of your microservices. If it cannot access, then make a call to API gateway. API gateway will redirect it to the right microservice and get it handled. Thank you for complimenting my explanation skills. Okay. I think somebody asked me a question. Where is it? By any chance, are we going to use or learn GraphQL? We are not. So Murali is asking, frontend is connected to backend via a gateway. So do we need a gateway for an API application to connect with database, or each of the API application have its own DB? So first of all, each application will have its own DB or not. That depends on your use case. If that is necessary for your application, then connect every application with a new with its own database. If it's not necessary, you can connect each of the applications to the same database also. That is totally fine. And your front end can connect to the API gateway just like that. Your any API client may also be connecting to the API gateway. That is the right way of doing it. How to connect the front end to backend for Google authentication? You have to use OAuth and understand how to make use of OAuth and Spring Security to make that happen. Two microservices connected to the same DB will cause error if concurrently changes are made. That is correct. Therefore, you have to add a lot of constraints and rules on the database so that that does not happen. For example, optimistic locking. Not audible. I think I should be audible. Yes, I'm still audible. Can two services work with two different databases? Yes, they can. So apparently I have nothing else to teach right now, so I can answer your questions. It's 10:14 and we have time until 11 p.m. If I'm able to answer all of your questions before 11 p.m., then I will close the class before 11 p.m. Is database needed for authentication? That depends on what kind of authentication technique you are using. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Suppose a microservice is to be communicated by two other internal services. How is it going to handle the multiple requests if they request it at the same time? Okay. So if there is one microservice, let's say this, and it is sending requests to two services at the same time. Okay, so now it depends whether sending request to service 2 is dependent on sending request to service 1 or not. So if service 1 succeeds or fails, if that is going to be the deciding factor to go to service 2 or not. If yes, then you must finish service 1 first and then go to service 2. If it is not dependent, then you can make both of these two requests asynchronously at the same time. Okay? You can make both of these two requests asynchronously at the same time. I said 8:14, not 8:40. Can you explain Fiend client and service discovery? I can do that, but for that I need a microservice architecture which I don't have on my system right now. If anyone goes for Spring Boot fresher interview, then what are the trending requirement for it? This is out of scope. I am not doing an interview management skills for Spring Boot course right now. So there are so many things that will be necessary for that. So for that, you need to be a developer in Spring Boot. If you're totally fresher, you will not be able to clear it. You need to have hands-on experience on Spring Boot in order to clear it. Sir, in rest of the time, can we create little microservice project with the help of Spring Boot for better understanding? Uh, I think I might already have it on my system. Let me show that to you. I'll show it to you. I already have it on my machine. I will show you that application that I've already created. Can we go through Clark authentication or either? No, we are not going to do that. Any more questions? Microservices architecture types, which one frequently used and why? There is no microservice architecture type. If two microservices use the same database, can we use a common configuration file for the DB connection? Yes, you can do that. You can do that. How? Create a configuration file, store it in a S3 bucket, fetch that configuration file, use it. It needs that common configuration file needs to be accessible to both of the services, right? So before you start your Spring Boot application, you'll have to write a script that fetches that file and then starts your application. Would RBAC be implemented using JWT or something else? Well, in Spring security, RBAC is handled in a very nice manner. So JWT may not be that necessary. But yes, JWT would be a good way of doing it. Which one would be better, Clark authentication, next auth, or Firebase auth? To be very honest, Sandeep, I have not worked on either of these three things, so I don't know. I'll be very honest, I don't know. What is RBAC? RBAC stands for role-based access control. I was just talking about this a few minutes ago. What is the difference between auth 2.0 and JWT? They are two different ways of authenticating a user. It's like asking what is the difference between an auto rickshaw and a car. Both can take you to some place, but they both work on different mechanisms. Do we have to handle course in every service or we can make it in one? You do that in your API gateway only in that case. The API gateway will take care of it if you're in a microservice architecture. What is microservice design patterns? There is no specific design pattern as such. What is the limitation of JWT over auth? JWT is a type of auth, so there is no, that question is invalid. Which one is better? I think JWT is better than auth 2.0. That's my personal opinion. Okay, there's one small thing I can do right now. That is to explain you how two microservices can connect with each other. Let me take you to a different code base right now. This is something I am teaching with JDBL right now. So JDBL is a class that Geeks for Geeks conducts where people pay and take a 24 2.5 hours long session Spring Boot bootcamp where I teach in 24 sessions entire Spring Boot. So that is a class that I'm already taking right now and about to finish. So in that particular class outline, I did work on a microservice project. So this is that microservice project. Let me show this to you. There might be a lot of pieces of code that you don't recognize right now. Okay. Okay. So there are two services. Okay. I want you to focus on this code base. I am trying to tell you how to connect two different microservices right now. So there are two services, service one and service two. Okay. Service one and service two. Service one has only one controller called as service one controller. It is having a get mapping on slash first name and it returns you a response object of Shantanu. It returns you a string called as Shantanu. Okay. It returns you an object called as, it returns you the first name Shantanu. Similarly, if I go to service 2, then it has its own controller, service 2 controller over here. And this service 2 controller has a get mapping of last name. Okay. Or I can just make it full name. Full name. Okay. Full name. So if I want to get the full name, if I want to get the full name, then I need the first name. Yes or no? That is a last name and a first name. If I want to get the full name, I need first name and last name. Is that correct? Is that correct? Now, so let's say service 2 already knows my last name is Shubham, but it does not know what is my first name. So it has to ask service 1 for my first name. Are you understanding what I'm saying? It has to ask service 1 for my first name. Are you getting my statement? Right? So let's start both of the services. Okay, so this is my service 1. I will start it. Starting my service 1. I'll wait for it to start first. Okay, so service 1 is now running. Okay, if I go to service 1 controller, focus, it's a get mapping on first name. Okay, that is something I want you to notice. Then I'll go to service 2 application. And in service 2 controller, everything is okay. So what I will do is I will run my service 2 also. So now I'm going to run my service 2 application and I will also run my service 2 application. So running my service 2 application. Okay, so now my service 2 application is also running. So line number 30 that you're seeing over here, it is going to talk to service 1 and going to give me the first name. And then after getting the first name, it will take the first name over here and append it with the last name and give me that full name. So let's try to make this request. Instead of using Postman, I can also use my terminal. So I can just write curl HTTP localhost 9090. So my service 2 is running on port 9090 slash full underscore name. The moment okay, wrong spelling. Localhost, HOST. Press enter. You can see it says Shantanu Shubham. Do you see this? Do you see this? Are you able to see this part of the code? So here Shantanu is coming from service 1 and Shubham is coming from service 2. So line number 30 is doing that communication. So this communication strategy is by using something called as Fiend client. However, we don't have the time to discuss Fiend client. So I'm going to comment this way of discussion and I will do it this way using REST template, which I was showing you with the help of Geeks for Geeks application. Okay, so I will declare a object of REST template and here I will do get for entity, get for or object also I can do get for object. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? 1 second, get for object returns me a what? Type T only, right? Okay, fine. So here I am trying to make an API call to localhost 7070, which is my service one. And on that URL, I'm trying to make an API call to slash first underscore name. Okay. This API call will happen, and then I will get my response. In this class, service one response is created by me because this class is showing how the response is going to come. So this is showing the same way that I will get my response, and I'm telling that whatever response I'm getting, please make it an object of service one response class. So it will make it an object of that class. Therefore, I am declaring an object R1 of type service one response. And here I can ask it to print my first name, and then I can also ask it to send me the response with first name plus last name. Let me restart my service 2. So I'm going to restart my service 2 application. Okay, so now I have started my service 2. Now I will do the same API call again, and it gives me Shantanu Shubham. Okay, so the REST template we are using REST template for connection between service 1 and service 2. Clear? Did you understand how we did this? Is there a big role of multi-threading in microservices? Technically, no, because multi-threading only works in one microservice. Like I'll give you an example. So let's say I'm running Java code on my computer. So whatever multi-threading code I've written, it only works on my computer. So let's say there are two threads of two different processes or on two different computers, then they can never interact with each other, right? So in a microservice architecture, your multi-threading is limited to your service only, or technically it is limited to the place where your service is running. So technically it has less role of multi-threading. It has a small multi-threading has smaller role in the area of microservices. In order to call multiple APIs, we need to do it in the same way, or is there an easier way approach? Depends on it depends on a lot of things actually. It's very difficult to answer your question. If you have multiple API calls, then make it a completable future and call all of them at the same time. It depends on your use case, depends on what each API is giving, whether making another API call is dependent on the response of a previous API call, blah, 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 blah. So many things are needed to be considered. So you have to give me a very specific use case to give you a very specific answer. Okay, so I think the time right now is 10:30. So we still have 30 minutes. But again, I have nothing else to teach for today. For tomorrow, we have three more topics. Let me just get my hands on it. Deploying Spring Boot application to cloud, basic. Okay, and secure APIs with basic authentication, fine, and hands-on mini backend project. So we will take our previous application, that is the student one, and we will try to add some more logic on top of it, like adding uh adding what? Okay, we'll think about it tomorrow. We'll discuss it tomorrow only. What cloud service will be we using? I have not decided that. Can we get the project on GitHub? I am sorry, I cannot give you this project on GitHub because this is, I think this is unfair to give you this project because this is specifically for those people who signed up for the JDBL session. So it's a company resource. Any suggestion for Spring Boot new learners? Any specific course suggestions from your side? You can just join our JDBL session. I will help you learn Spring Boot from end to end as long as you know Java. I understood the REST template call you showed. If you can show how you did it using Fiend client, you can see it. This is how Fiend client works. The one that inside which I'm teaching you, you already have the Git repository for that. So you just follow the same Git repository. You cannot get the recordings. It's going to be on YouTube. Please, I don't understand why everybody is asking the question on around recording. If this class matters so much to you, just join on time. I understand you're not able to keep up with the pace, but then it's going to be on YouTube. Simple as that. Yesterday's code is on GitHub. It will be pushed to GitHub only. And it's the same link is going to work. If you know GitHub, you would know how to use it. Where can I join the bootcamp for Spring Boot? Just go to GFG website. You will see an option of joining Java full backend development course. How the call is coming to this Fiend client from service one. Well, that's more complex. We are not discussing Fiend client right now. So I'll talk about it when we have a more specified class on Fiend client. In the meantime, you can always do a chat GPT. Is Razorpay service good for a simple e-commerce website, or is there even more? I don't know. I think Razorpay should be fine. I don't feel tired in the entire session. Thanks for explanation, energy. Thanks. Thank you for the compliment, Mohit. Any more questions, anyone? Today we have a lot of time for answering questions. So please feel free to ask all of your questions that are related to our class. If you ask me questions outside our class, then I will not answer. Any resources for learning Java topics like generics, etc.? See, Geeks for Geeks is great. And if there's this one very good book that I always that the place where I learned Java from, that book is called as the Complete Reference to Java. That book will help you understand Java like nothing else can. Uh, yeah, I have that book, big one. Yes, that's a big book. If someone just joined with not much experience with Java full stack, can they catch up by watching the YouTube videos? They can, but it's going to be a difficult thing because you think about it like this. You are a business owner and you have hired somebody on the basis of their skills, and now they don't know it, they're just learning on the job. So, of course, it will take more time. It's always better to learn what you're going to work on before you join. It's basic expectation of the employer. And if you don't learn or if you're just learning on the job, you'll be slow and that can impact your reviews and appraisal. And the current market, it can even lead to a layoff. So please be very, very sure of what you're doing. The book name is The Complete Reference to Java. Then for Spring and Spring Boot with real-time project, the resources should. Then for Spring Boot, then for Spring and Spring Boot with real-time project, which resources we should follow. Just watch videos on YouTube or take up any course on Geeks for Geeks or any place that you think is correct. So all you need is a structured outline for learning the project and study it dedicatedly. How much knowledge of Spring is necessary to jump on Spring Boot? When I started Spring Boot, I knew nothing about Spring. So you have your answer. Any specific articles you follow? I don't follow any articles. However, I'm the one who sometimes write articles. So yeah. So when I started learning Spring Boot, I knew nothing about Spring. So I think you know my answer. Spring is obsolete, right? Not really. It depends. It depends. Not really obsolete, but yeah, less used. It's like saying we have cars, our auto rickshaws obsolete. No. I mean, if you want to drive in the city and if you want it to be really fast and if you want to cut in the road wherever you want and evade traffic police, an auto rickshaw is better than a car. So it depends on your use case. How did I master Spring Boot? I learned Spring Boot when I was in college. And how did I learn it? By myself. So there is this one more Java backend framework called as Drop Wizard. So I learned Drop Wizard in uh, in in a mentorship of a senior engineer that I knew personally. They taught me Drop Wizard backend technology in Java, and I learned it and I got very good at it in a few months. But then I was very curious to learn Spring Boot. So I started getting my hands dirty on Spring Boot after watching hardly a few YouTube videos. And then I realized it's very similar to what I already know in Drop Wizard. So I started doing Spring Boot on the base of assumptions, like how would I do this in Drop Wizard and how to do this in Spring Boot. And slowly, I got to learn a lot of things. When I was in my last year of college, I started a company whose entire backend infrastructure was written by me as a last year college graduate in Spring Boot. So that entire startup that I created, it made me learn a lot of things in Spring Boot, depending on what I wanted to create at that time. However, not everything was perfect. A lot of things were based out of my assumption. And trust me, I was just a college graduate. So I did not know a lot of things. But I learned a lot from my mistakes and I slowly learned a lot of new things. When I started teaching Spring Boot, then again I learned a lot of things. So in my current job I have an experience close to 4 years, and only in this company I've started to work on Spring Boot properly. Before this I never worked on Spring Boot also. So even before joining my current company and joining my current project, I already knew a lot of things about Spring Boot. So after joining my company I started to know even more things about Spring Boot. And after teaching, because I also teach Spring Boot, sometimes I have to read those topics that I don't know, and that makes me learn even more topics around Spring Boot. So that's my Spring Boot journey. How much knowledge? Okay. When I do code first time in Spring Boot, I love it. That's great. Do you think BTech degree is required for backend engineer roles at non-FANG, because FANG in India asks for it a lot? See, BTech is required in most companies, even in non-FANG companies, is what I believe. But however, a few startups, few companies might not require BTech degree in the first place. But it's like a standard. I think it would be better if you do have one. What was the startup name? It's called Walnut, and it's still active. I am not a part of that startup anymore, but it's still active. There are people who are still working on it. Everybody is talking about AI will impact developers. So will it really do for a backend developer? See, we use a lot of AI in our company for writing code. I, as an engineer, tell AI to a lot of things to write code. Like just today, I was telling AI to write unit test cases for me. So it did it, but it's not always perfect. Many a times, in order to understand whether it's correct or not, you need an engineer. So AI can only write the logic of what you ask it to write. It cannot understand what logic to write by itself. What should we focus more on? Project based learning, even when we don't know all things. Yes. Just think about what you want to do and then ask yourself question how to do this. If you always remain in the mindset that first I will learn everything and then I will do it, then you will never be able to learn everything because it's like an ocean. What about agentic AI? Agentic AI is the same thing. Same thing. Can you suggest some projects that we can do in our final year? I am asking you because you are having an idea in the market. Apparently, you can make any project in any technology of your choice, which is relevant to the kind of role you want to get. Secondly, try to implement things in a more complex manner and in a better manner, because ultimately nobody is going to ask you to show me the whole project that you have written. However, they might ask you what are the things you implemented and how you implemented them. So maybe you can create an e-commerce application also, even though a lot of people have that project, but it's still a good project to create. Thoughts on Monstack? Monstack is very good, very much in the demand in the market, especially in startups and mid-scale companies. Node.js is a great backend framework, so Monstack is great. What advice would I also know Monstack? What advice would you give an unemployed graduate of BTech who just wants to get a job? What are the companies looking for? First of all, I don't have the answer of what companies you should be looking for. Just go in the market, whatever company you get, because you're unemployed. So first of all, get a job, then think about switching to a better company. May MERN can lead to job in Mang. That depends on whether Mang is the project that you're applying for is using a MERN stack based project or not. However, I will always recommend my students to never limit yourself to one technology. Like today, I work with Spring Boot, but like I told you that this is only my first job where I have started to work with Spring Boot. Before this, I worked with serverless computing, Node.js development, backend development in Django, etc., etc., etc. So tomorrow also, if I change my job, I don't know which technology stack I'm going to get. But does that mean I cannot change my job? Of course I can. So never restrict yourself to a technology. Restrict yourself to a concept. So even if that concept needs to be implemented in a different technology, you should be absolutely fine with it. Do we really need NoSQL DB for e-commerce website? Yes. Sometimes in many situations you will need it. Can you share some tips or tricks to better understand and remember Spring and Spring Boot concepts? I often get stuck while learning and it becomes difficult to continue. Okay, if you're trying to learn a new spoken language, like I live in Bangalore or Bengaluru, and ever since I moved to the city, I started to learn South Indian languages. So I started to learn Telugu and I can speak Telugu now. I started to learn Kannada and I can speak Kannada now. How did I learn it? By practicing. I wrote the language, I learned how to read and write. I spoke to people who are very fluent in that language, and only then I am able to speak, and only then I'm able to remember. If I don't use it, I'll forget. Even if you stop talking in English for 3 to 4 years, you'll forget English also. So it's only about practice. The more you practice, the more you retain. If you don't practice, you don't retain. Simple as that. Can I learn backend project with VS Code because other IDE does not work? Yeah, you can do it. IDE is never a problem. Will they look at how efficient your code is in your resume project? Not really. Is full stack development role fresher job? Is it okay with? Yes. I am working in MNC. My training was initially for Spring Boot. Now I'm working as support engineer. Please suggest me what switch your company. ఎలా ఉన్నారు నేను బాగున్నాను. Stop talking to me in Telugu. That's funny. Which front end do you use in Intuit to integrate with Spring Boot? We usually use React inside Intuit. I also have interest in teaching. How should I prepare for any guidance from where I can start? We can take this separately, Abang. I think this is not related to our class. Please suggest what kind of projects. I've already answered this question. Is there a way to get input from WhatsApp messages to go into backend? Yes, there is. So you need to append a listener to your backend, to your WhatsApp channel, and then when a message goes to that channel or that number, your backend service will listen to it, and then it will trigger an event and blah blah blah. So many things that will happen, but yes, it's possible. I have 1.2 years of experience and want to switch, but every company is looking for at least 2+ years of experience. What would you suggest? I will request you to wait for 2+ years because that is when you can get a good designation which supports your years of experiences with a good compensation as well. All right. I don't think we have any more questions. I've already answered everything about our session. And like I said, if you ask me questions outside the session, I'm not going to answer it. Okay. So sorry about that. All right. On this note, I think we are good to close the session for today. So thank you everybody for joining today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.